Hi and welcome back to Movies Reloaded. Today we have a great recapped movie for you, so sit back and relax and enjoy the film. 1961, with Anit running to meet Taj inside the car, they sound excited to see each other, and it doesn't take long for them to start making out, and while they're doing it Nick tells Tage she can't believe they'll be having a baby together. A while later Need's father appears out of nowhere and drags Meet out of the car, complaining that she was sleeping with Taj, who happens to be her cousin. He drags her out of the car and threatens Tag. After that, Noor is taken to a room where she will be put to sleep before the procedure begins elsewhere. As the men enter the room, the landlord points to the wall, and as one of the men breaks off a piece of the wall, the landlord checks through only to be disgusted by the sight of mummified bodies sitting at a table. A short while later, a woman named Rose is assisting Carl to interview for Assad's replacement before a co-worker named Back enters. Rose complains that Carl didn't like any of the visitors, and as they continue their conversation after the applicant departs, Back brings up the mummified body and how he was going to take the case. However, before Back can even finish, Carl begins to take the case, despite Back's attempts to stop him. As Back is pursuing Carl, Assad appears, and Assad immediately meets with Carl, who says he doesn't think Back will be able to solve such a case. It doesn't take them long to arrive at the crime scene, where a forensic scientist informs them that the victims had even been served parts of their body, with an abdomen and ovary among the things in a jar on the table. The men also discover an empty chair on the floor, which suggests that someone else was supposed to be in the room. They also get the name of the room's last occupant, which has the initials of the person who lived there most recently. She claims that Philip worked with her at Sprogo as he was their defense attorney, though she doesn't seem to know more. Back at Sprogo in 1961, Need is brought in to see Kurt, who examines her and also questions her on her period in relationship with Taj. Need lies about getting her period and also talks about her futility. Weeks later, he tells her he found love elsewhere with their son, then learns that the mail was sent from Spain when Carl and Assad also mentioned it. She is then brought to her room, where she is greeted by Rita, her roommate, who asks her right away why she is there when Nate talks about loving Taj. Carl and Assad are informed by Rose that the last victim had finally been identified, and it just so happens to be Rita, as they then try to find a connection between all the victims in Kit. Rita looks unmoved, and then pulls out a cigarette and tells Neat not to tell anyone about it, as well as mentioning that she got it from some farmers outside the facility who got a moment of pleasure as payment. Back to the present, the following day, Rose takes Carl and Assad to Sprogo, where she has arranged for a guard named Brandt to show them around the facility after Rose mentions the Spanish authorities had discovered Kit's house in Spain and the account she used to pay the rent. Later that night, Carl would be informed that the Spanish authorities had been unable to find anything and had already closed her account, suggesting that she must have known they were onto her. The following day, Carl and Assad meet with the chief to discuss Kurt, but the chief seems surprised to hear the name, stating that Kurt had assisted his wife in becoming pregnant, and that if they must question him, they had to be G. When they leave Kurt's new fertility clinic, Carl and Assad begin to question Kurt, especially after noticing the picture of dead people on his table. Rita learns that Need is pregnant and tells her that she must flee because Kurt and the nurses could do bad things to her if they found out. Need isn't sure of this, but Rita says they could flee and meet with a fisherman, promising that the men wouldn't do anything with her. Later that night, the ladies flee and meet with a man inside a small cabin who tells Need that she must do something. Carl and Assad concur that they don't believe anything. Kurt then compliments Rita on her performance in the present. Carl and Assad meet with Brandt, who tells them about how his aunt had been sterilized there and eventually committed suicide after learning she was no longer able to bear children. Brandt also claims that Sprogo was Kurt's personal project because he was determined to sterilize impoverished immigrant young girls in order to benefit the wealthy, because he believed the poor girls weren't deserving of being fertile. Additionally, Brent claims that Kurt continues to do this at his new fertility center by providing anonymous and cost-free pregnancy terminations, also supporting his assertion with a video of young girls entering the establishment. As he observes the clip when Assad approaches her, he immediately displays shock before telling Brandt that they would contact him as soon as they were outside. Assad reveals to Carl that he is acquainted with the woman in the video and verifies what Brandt had said. When Assad convinces Noor to accompany him to the hospital for a checkup, he doesn't explain why, but when the doctor is done, she emerges to inform Assad that Noor is no longer able to give birth. Assad says he'll tell her himself after appearing dejected, although the doctor confirms it to her as well. Noor doesn't believe it, and she then appears upset. The police chief is contacted right away, and Rose is informed that Carl and Assad are now interested in some medical records. He then asks Rose to send it to them, while Kurt has a meeting with his parents. Assad tells Rose that she will need to speak to the police to report, but since doing so would mean that her parents would learn about it, She refuses and storms out of the hospital. In the meantime, Carl and Assad decide to see Philip's wife again. When they do, she informs them that she doesn't know much about his work, though she knew he didn't like immigrants, just as it looks like they can't get any more from her. She offers them the chance to look at some of Phil's work. Brandt starts to get suspicious that someone was after him and calls Rose to come to his. As he's expecting Rose, he sees a man walk around his bunk later with 2 boxes in tow. Carl and Assad leave the building, unaware that the biker is standing on a bridge watching them. The moment the biker and another passenger attack their car, flipping it after hitting several roadblocks, the 2 men are trying to get out when they see the bikers approach, but before they can reach them, Carl manages to shoot one of the bikers in the hand, forcing them to flee. When Assad asks Carl what he found in Neat's document, he doesn't say anything and instead sends a text to someone else. In the meantime, Rose arrives at Brandt's bunker to discover that he has been killed. As she attempts to revive him, the killer attacks her. After some struggle, she is able to fight back, allowing the person to flee back in time. Need is cuffed to a bed in the torture room when Kirk enters to take advantage of her, but she bites his ear in the process, making him angry because he now knows she is pregnant. An announcement is made stating that Sprogo would be closing and all patients would be released immediately. At the scene of Brandt's murder, Carl, Assad, and Rose meet with the police chief and inform him of the attempted assassination on their lives as well. They also mention that Kurt probably had a group because the medical records sent to Carl contained several doctors who engaged in illegal activity. All of these doctors were defended by Philip. However, the chief says that unless there is solid evidence, Kurt cannot be arrested. However, just then, Carl receives a call informing him about a person who the following day, Nora goes to Kurt's hospital and furiously complains to Beat about learning that she couldn't give birth again. Beat tries to calm her down and bring her into a room to talk to her. When it does, he sees one of the passengers and calls her Neat. He then accuses her of being the only one with a motive, but she responds that she has a motive of her own. Additionally, Assad discovers that Nur is nowhere to be found and that she had gone back to Kurt's hospital to confront them when he arrived. When Rose calls him to inform him that the nurse phone location indicates that she is still in the building, Assad accuses Kurt of holding NER back at the hospital. He then almost starts a fight but stops when he notices the security camera in the hallway. Carl's pursuit of the elderly woman leads him to a boat, where he finally persuades her to admit that all she had done was seek retribution and that the last chair in the room was intended for Kurt, but she abandoned her plan when Taj returned to her following everything that had occurred. After hearing her account, Carl drinks some of the herbane she has in her flask and tells her that he won't report her and that he'd make sure Kurt was arrested. After seeing Gunnar, who claims that the chief sent him, Assad stops looking around and tells him that they must leave before Kurt discovers them and files a case against them. When Assad is about to leave, he suddenly notices a door and opens it to discover her lying on a bench with Kurt also present. Assad tells Gunnar to get assistance and then departs, telling Kurt that he believed immigrants didn't deserve to be fertile. Kirk signals for Gunnar to enter the room, and he shoots Assad with Kurt saying he had told the police that Assad had tried to kill him and that Gunnar had saved him. Kurt also asked Gunnar and a nurse to take Nur away and kill her far from the center, but as they were taking her out, she woke up and found the strength to flee. When Carl finally arrives, Gunnar recognizes him and tells him that he was there to save Assad. However, as Carl looks around, he notices that one of Gunnar's hands is bleeding, and he suddenly remembers that he had shot the biker in the hand earlier. As both men fight, Carl manages to push Gunnar to the building's lower floor. In the meantime, Nur walks in on Kurt, injecting Assad to kill him, and she smashes something. Carl enters and shoots him before calling for an ambulance to arrive and save Assad because his condition is urgent. When Assad regains consciousness while Carl is sleeping on a chair in Assad's room, Carl is relieved to see him awake and tells Assad he wants to stay with him in the department. As his partner Assad jokes about Carl not waiting until he recovers, and as both men hug, Carl expresses his desire for Assad to stay with him in the department. Carl is scared and even sobs in private. After leaving the office and spotting a woman he admires inside a cafe, Carl enters and strikes up a conversation with her. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed the recap. Let us know in the comments what you thought, and while you're here, consider subscribing. We would love to have you as part of our community.